positive rippling effect of the work of Amnesty International and participants like you, like it says tonight, cannot be measured. It really cannot be measured, but it does make a world of difference in the communities and everybody's freedoms of expression and making it safer around the world. I want to personally thank each and every one of you for that, your heart, your compassion, willing to get out and be involved in talking about everybody else's rights. May not be here, but somewhere in the world. God bless you and thank you for doing that. And I'd like to pass this on to you. I mean, it's not like the governor, but it's the best I can do. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Group 471, for inviting me. Thank you, Alessandra, and all those who are supporting the work of you guys, because you make a difference. And of course, the first question that you are going to ask yourself is, what's the point? What's the point of talking about things that happened 40 years ago? And let me refer to those first pages of this book, Night, of Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, excellent poet, and survivor of the Holocaust. In those first pages of Night, I mean, he talks about this character, Moshe the Beetle. And Moshe was living in Romania in the 1940s when he was taken with so many other Jews to Poland, where the Gestapo executed them. Moshe survived and came back to Romania and told the people of his town what he had seen, what he had witnessed. And the people made fun of him. They laughed. They thought that he was kind of like a clown. And he told them, I don't want money or pity. I only want you to listen to me. I only want you to listen to me. They didn't listen. The Holocaust took place, and we know the consequences for the Jews, for the Gypsies, for the communists, the socialists, the homosexuals of Europe. 10 million people died. So the lesson that Elie Wiesel is really trying to articulate in those first pages is mainly that we need to listen. We need to make sure that we have memory, that we learn from those past experiences of genocide, because they are happening again. And there's a long list of other genocides that took place after the Holocaust, of course, and some of them quite recent. And like in Rwanda, some people wanted to ignore it. Anyway, so yes, I was a student leader, I was a worker in Argentina. I was one of those many Latin Americans that in the 1970s, and don't forget we're talking of the time of the Cold War, one of those young people who had all kind of dreams for a better future. And because of the situation that was taking place in the region, I mean, in 1976, there was a military coup, and the military closed down Congress. They prohibited any kind of political activity, and this created also at the same time a secret state. They started to fight against those that they considered the enemy with methods that were completely outside the legal framework of any democratic country. And it was kind of like creating a parallel state, a secret state. So when they will talk in front of the cameras to the international community, Argentina was fine. But at the same time, I mean, they were kidnapping, they were torturing, they were creating concentration camps that were called clandestine centers of detention. As a matter of fact, 340 documented said concentration camps between 1976 and 1983. And they were, of course, extrajudicially killing anyone that was opposed to them, anyone who was neutral, anyone that did not join their totalitarian discourse. So 30,000, according to Amnesty International, 30,000 Argentinians were killed, and probably 200,000 left the country into exile. So I was this young student at a cafe with 2 other people when they arrested me. They took me to a place called Departamento de Informaciones 2 in downtown Córdoba, and there I was tortured. I was kept there for a week, and after that I was taken to the UP1, one of the most notorious political prisons during the military era, and I spent there the whole year of 1976, when we were completely incommunicado from the rest of the world, and we were constantly harassed. The military will come at any point, will get inside the prison with their soldiers, and they will beat us up, and they will take people out from there, and they will execute them. In the area where I was, 31 political prisoners were killed. And of course, again, all this was part of this big idea that Argentina was threatened and that they needed to reimpose Western values that were being lost. But in reality, I mean, it was the excuse to try to stop social change. It was the excuse to try to stop the democratization of a country that for decades had the generals and not elected presidents in their pink house, Casa Rosada. So the thing is that I only have 10 minutes. I would love to tell all my story, but I will have to present a very brief version of what happened in those days. That year, 1976, was really very, very challenging. To give you one little examples of those 31 fellow prisoners that were there, that were executed. One day, suddenly the military, like they usually did, will come inside with their dogs, with some soldiers with their weapons, and they will take us out to the yard and beat us. We were completely naked, our heads against the wall, and they will be walking around the yard beating us up. And at some point, a student of journalism, Raúl Augusto Bauduco, who was in his 20s, didn't feel very well and fell to the ground. A non-commissioned officer approached him and told him to get up. He couldn't, of course, so the non-commissioned officer walked like 5 yards towards an officer, consulted with the officer, came back, got his weapon, put it on his head, and said, "Get up," and shot. And he was immediately killed. There are 30 other cases that are documented. The people that participated in that action, I mean, were ultimately taken to trial. Because Argentina, unlike many other Latin American countries that went through a similar experience, at some point, I mean, recovered democracy and set up trials, and many of those generals, many of those officers that were involved in those horrible atrocities ended up in jail. In my case, after being in UP1 in Córdoba, at some point, I mean, I was in December of 1976, I was taken with about 40 other people to a different area of the political prison, and there they asked us to get on our knees. They blindfolded us, they handcuffed us, and they told us that they were going to pray because they were going to kill us. But instead of killing us, I mean, they took us to trucks, and from those trucks to planes, and from those planes to another political prison where suddenly, I mean, things improved. We were not under the control of this crazy General Menendez, and things there were much better. When I was there, and the name of this political prison, the southern part of the province of Buenos Aires was Sierra Chica. When I was there, I was told that the group in Austin, Texas, Group 169, that was led by this lady, Mary Evelyn Porter, had adopted me as a prisoner of conscience. So knowing that, suddenly, I mean, made a complete difference. The moral boost that I got, I mean, was incredible. Suddenly, I realized that there were people out there that care and that were not labeling me a terrorist like the military were saying. Suddenly, I realized that there was hope. And keep in mind that for the whole of 1976, I have been incommunicado. I didn't know anything about what was going out there. The military were telling us they were going to kill us all. And suddenly, I mean, I was getting a completely different picture. I found out that this group was writing letters. And at some point, I mean, I was also interviewed by a representative of the Red Cross, someone from France, the International Red Cross. And obviously, I knew that that guaranteed my life. After that, a few months later, I was transferred to another political prison, the third one, La Plata, where things improved even better. I had newspapers, I had books, and I was able to get letters from Mary Evelyn Porter from Austin, Texas, Group 169. Letters that went to Brazil, and then from Brazil came to Argentina with a different name, like it was a relative writing to me. So now, definitely, that idea of hope, that idea that people value what I have been doing in Argentina in terms of supporting democratic institutions became something key in me. In 1979, I was finally released. This person from Amnesty International was there in Argentina. This is not typical, but she took it quite personal. She traveled to Argentina, and she was there when I was released. And I wasn't allowed to leave the country until 1980, and then I went to Canada, and as a matter of fact, it ended up being that we started a family there. The thing is that it's very difficult to say that there's a connection, objectively, that there's a connection between those letters and the fact that the things improved in the different political prisons where I was. It's very difficult to say that there is a connection between me being transferred to a better place. It's very difficult to say that there is a connection between Amnesty International's work and my release in July 1979. But inside me, there was never, ever, ever any doubt that those letters that were written by those people in the 1970s made that critical difference. There is no doubt that those letters that you guys write, there is no doubt that those phone calls that at some point you might make, I mean, make a difference. Change the lives of people in places that you can never imagine. So please continue to write, especially taking into account what has been happening in the world recently. Because now I've been talking about Argentina in the 1970s, but we could be talking about El Salvador in the 80s, or we could be talking about North Korea throughout the decades, or we'll be talking about China, Myanmar. And unfortunately, we could also be talking about things that happened in this country few years ago, and that in many ways have not ended yet. Because when I talk about kidnapping in Argentina in the 1970s, I think of that new word that appears in the American dictionary that's called extraordinary rendition. When I talk about clandestine centers of detention of Argentina in the 1970s, in the American dictionary appears that word, black sites. When I talk about the torture, I hear the words of Professor John Yoo, who during the Bush administration supported torture in the torture memos. So there are different discourses in the American democracy. There's a discourse that goes back to that idea that individual rights are fundamental. A discourse that connects with the ideas of Jefferson, Madison, with the ideas of the Enlightenment that became the foundation of this extraordinary country, of this fantastic United States of America. But there is another narrative also, there is another discourse, and it's a discourse of those that want to fight the threat against the American state, not only with guns, but in the Constitution, but they wanted to fight it only with guns. They want to ignore the American Constitution. They want to use any means because in their utilitarian minds, they think that the objective is worth it. And let's not allow that to happen. Let's make sure that those ones that few years ago were articulating the idea that it's okay to torture, that's okay to kidnap people, that's okay to make them disappear for years and to keep them outside the legal framework of this great country, that never happens, that we stop that. Thank you very much.
I was asked to say a few words about some things that are happening in this world as you and I are sitting here, and to try and put this into some context for y'all, especially those of you who are students and who in the near future are going to be running this city, this state, this country, and this world. Your turn is coming. Every generation gets its turn, and you won't be any different. So I want to start by just asking some rhetorical questions of you for you to think about. They're easy questions to ask, but they're not necessarily easy to really contemplate for who we are as people. So I would ask just the basic questions of all of you. I mean, who are you, really? Who are you when it comes to human rights? I'm an American. Do you think that you should be entitled to all of the rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights because of who you are, because you're a person? I would assume your answer would be, darn right, I should have these rights. And then the next question is, okay, what about other people in this world, and especially people who don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't speak your language, pray to a God they call under a different name, maybe they don't pray to any God. What rights do these people have? Do we or do we not believe that all people are entitled to all rights at all times? Or do we make an exception and try to say, I believe in human rights except? And when we make that statement and begin the phrase except, we are on the path to a nightmare for somebody. Because there is no except. There's no, I believe in human rights except for Muslims, except for Hindus, except for women, except for anybody. We either accept the basic truth in human rights, that all people are entitled to all rights at all times and all dignity at all times, or we don't and we make excuses to justify how and why we're going to persecute them in the name of some laws. That is the simple reality that we are under. This is not rocket science. It is basic, simple question that falls under a very broad heading entitled bad human behavior. There are 200 countries in the world as recognized by the UN. People are imperfect in every country, and every country in the world has problems, bar none. So here's just some that you may be aware of like I am if you follow the news every day, and some that you may not be aware of. We can all, in the comfort of our homes, follow the seemingly unending nightmare on a daily basis in a country called Syria. A country that has torn into itself now for years. A country of 26 million people, 8 million of whom are displaced people. 1/3 of the country tonight is not going to sleep in their home with a roof over their head. At long last, when this night is over and we disperse, I'm assuming everybody here is going to go home, they're going to have a roof over their head, they're going to be secure from the elements. You're going to click a light switch, it will get dark, and you will go to sleep and wake up tomorrow with a new day. This is as it should be. This is as it should be for you, for me, your loved ones, my loved ones, and all people in the world. But 8 million people in Syria won't have this luxury. Some of them are mercifully across the border and are now called refugees. And they are in countries that not many people want to go to. They're in Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, countries with their own political problems and an infrastructure that can't handle hundreds of thousands of Syrians, but they are across the border. Winter is coming in Syria. Winters in Syria are harsh. They're not this generically nice weather that we're with. It's snowy, it's cold, people will be exposed to the elements, and people will perish because of the conditions that they are exposed to. At least those that cross the border are lucky because they qualify as refugees and they are supposed to be protected by the UN and the High Commissioner for Refugees that is supposed to provide food, clothing, blankets, and shelter for those people. 3 million of the 8 million Syrians are refugees, but 5 million others, the majority of the displaced people in Syria, they are not as fortunate. They have not crossed a border. They are internally displaced people, and no one in the world looks out for them. They will be subject to the brutality of the forces that drove them to be displaced, in addition to starvation, the weather, the elements, and there's no entity in the world that looks out for internally displaced people. Now, we can know about what's happening in Syria to some degree because there are journalists there, human rights organizers there, although it's spotty to know exactly how terrible it is. Over 80 journalists have been killed in Syria in just the last year. This doesn't look like much. I'm reaching for a pen. It isn't. It's a pen. But if you choose to do this profession in this world, this can get you killed merely for trying to talk about what is happening in a place called Syria. If you are somewhat numb from the horrors of Syria, then I ask you as young people, what is happening in your world in a place called Sudan/South Sudan? Genocide. I had students 20 years ago in 1994 sitting in a classroom watching Rwanda unfold on a nightly basis. 1 million people killed in Rwanda in 3 months. And what was their crime? Their crime was they had the bad luck to be born a Tutsi who their Hutu neighbors wanted them dead. 1 million people. That's virtually getting rid of the city of Dallas, the 8th largest city in the country. And their crime was just to be a Tutsi. So this is now happening on your watch. You are young people. And sooner or later, as you get a bit older, in the decades ahead, many of you will choose to be parents of your own and have children of your own. And they will ask you, what happened? What were you doing when you read about the slaughter of innocent people in South Sudan? I would hope that your answer would not be the most dangerous words in any language. I didn't know. That's not an answer anymore. I didn't know. That phrase leads us to these problems around the world of indifference and silence when innocent people suffer. This isn't rocket science. This is there, but for the grace of God go you and I. We lucked out. We're here. Your country is not going to come after you because of your faith, your skin color, your orientation. If you stay in this country, you may have hopes and dreams of doing something with your life, but you can't name anything which doesn't involve and won't involve human rights. Everything involves human rights. As soon as you start talking to somebody, that's human rights. It's all about manners, respect, dignity. Do you want to be taken for the person you are and be treated like a human being, or do you not? And of course, I'm sure you do. And so do other people that you want to interact with. Whatever you choose to do with your life will involve human rights. You may be a journalist. It involves human rights. Many of you may choose and be thinking of a career in the law. We all hear lawyer jokes in this country ad nauseum. But it's not a joke if you are a lawyer in this world and you, as the attorney, come under attack because of the unpopularity of your client. Try being an attorney in Turkey who has to defend a Kurd. Lawyers are targets. You may be thinking of a career in health, physicians, nursing, healthcare profession, where you try to alleviate suffering in this world. You are the target in countries all over this world. It's easy to think these problems are too much, they don't affect me, I'm sorry it's happening over there, but I can't do anything about it. Most Americans have never heard of a place called Chechnya inside the former Soviet Union. There are lots of people watching the finish line, at the finish line of the recent Boston Marathon, who'd never heard of Chechnya when they endured the horrors of what happened there earlier this year, where problems in Chechnya played out on the streets of Boston to the tune of several people being killed and other people being injured in a terrorist attack in the United States that came from halfway around the world in Chechnya. As bizarre as it seems, these incidents can happen here. They do happen here. And this is why you have to be aware of what is happening in this world. I would say without fail, the #1 human rights issue, if you were to ask a simple question, what's the real problem of human rights in this world? The answer, the answer that I'm going to give you, is not meant in any way to be cute or funny, and it's not meant to cause a laugh. But it's the reality. If you were to ask, what's the real problem of human rights in this world, the generic answer is men. Men are the problem. It is easy and truthful to say that this is a man's world. We can argue that it shouldn't be, but the reality is, it is a man's world. Men run most of the countries in this world. They make most of the laws in this world, and many of the laws that they make in most of the countries are detrimental to the other half of people on this world, women. So one of the serious issues in this world is violence against women, which is in every country in the world from A to Z, from Australia, Bangladesh, Chad, Denmark, Ethiopia, Finland, all the way down to Zimbabwe and countries at the other end of the alphabet, including our own. Those of you who are female in this audience have known this way better than men, because you might as well go through life with a sign around your neck that says, I'm a target because of my biology. It's pathetic, but it's true. Whether you're 4 days old, 4 months old, 14, 24, 54, or 104, age is no barrier to men who will attack women because they can, and will do it because of brutal political and other reasons which make no sense. So it is imperative for you as young men in this audience, those of you who are students, this is not a game. This is not a joke. We all hear the cultural pressure of young men in this world and in this country. And I'm urging you, those of you who are young men, now is the time to come to grips with the fact that women in your life, you all have women in your lives. All men have women in our lives at all times in our life. When we're much smaller, we call them mom, sister, teacher, grandmother, aunt. When you get a bit older, the names of the women change. They change to spouse, wife, daughter, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, and sometimes for many of you they will now encounter the word boss. You've got to get used to it. The time for you as young men to start caring about women's rights is not when you become a parent and the doctor says, congratulations, you're the father of a beautiful and healthy little girl. The time for you to start caring about women's rights in this country and around the world is now. Those of you who have women in your classes, those of you who are young men and have women in your classes, you may not be biologically related to them, but you've got to see these women as your family. That's what we are here. We are a human rights family, and we need to treat each other from the time that we can begin to make rational thoughts about who we are and how we want to act. We have to treat each other with manners, dignity, and respect. Women's rights are human rights, and it means for young women here, young women in Yemen, there's no reason why a 4-year-old girl should be sold to a 40-year-old man. Child brides still exist in this world. Acid attacks, female genital mutilation, crimes, rape in war. These are horrible subjects to even talk about. I hear myself saying this is not easy. These are not happy topics, but this is part of the reality of what human rights is. We are trying to get beyond this pain, beyond trauma, beyond suffering, to get to a world where you as young people don't have to have these issues in your life, don't have to deal with terrorism, don't have to deal with hate, don't have to deal with crimes against women. The goal of nations are supposed to be like people. They're supposed to grow up. They're supposed to get better. They're supposed to evolve. They're supposed to stop being children and become mature. Well, that's what we want. You as people will lead this country to a better place. So if you're asking, well, what can I do? This is so overwhelming. There's only one failure in human rights, only one. And that is the failure to do nothing. It is easy to throw up your hands and go, it's too much for me, it's overwhelming, I can't make a difference. You just heard Nestor speak. He's here alive in part because people, before you were born, wrote on his behalf. It doesn't seem like much. Write a letter, save a life. This has been Amnesty's motto since it was founded in 1961. It's hokey, but it's true. It works. If you were the person in jail, if you were Nestor, if you were the person on the sign that you're holding, that is a real person alive today. There, but for the grace of God, go you and I. If it were you in Indonesia, if it were you in Tunisia, if it were you in Argentina, if it were you in Uzbekistan, you would obviously want somebody to help you to know about your plight and to do something to get the boot of oppression off of your neck and the threat of torture out of your mind. That is what this is. It's not rocket science. It's manners to help people who, through no fault of their own, are in a nightmare. And it's time to end this damn human nightmare, and it's your job and mine to help it so. So if you ask, what can I do? Do something. Take your passion. Women's rights, children's rights, refugee, genocide, LGBT issues, homelessness, poverty, hunger, AIDS. There's no shortage of issues that affect you as human beings. I would ask you to do two things if you're not aware of them already. Go home, download, and keep a copy in your wallet of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's hard to talk about rights, and it's hard to demand rights if you don't even know what your rights are. So keep a copy of rights on you. Make everybody around you aware of who you are, that what you stand for is more important than what you fall for. And I would lastly ask you, if you are not aware, to go home, download, print out, or listen to a speech which, in my opinion, gets to the heart of what all of this is about. It was delivered in April of 1968 after the tragic assassination of Reverend King. It was delivered by Senator Robert Kennedy, who himself would meet the similar end 2 months later up the road in Los Angeles. Download the speech and listen to it, read it. It's all about how we treat each other. It's called The Mindless Menace of Violence. That is what this struggle is all about. I urge you, get involved, sign these letters, make everybody around you aware that your real job as students is not to become the best lawyer, the best doctor, the best artist, the best engineer. That's not your job. That's a means to an end. Your real job is to be the best human being you can be, to alleviate suffering now in this world for people in your life and for people that you haven't met yet and that many of you will bring into this world. That's your job, to take this country to a better place where we don't think we can go. It's called an America respectful and mindful of human rights. Thanks and God bless.
Wow. Rick and Nestor are pretty hard acts to follow. We really thank them both for coming here tonight. And we're going to recognize another outstanding person, a teacher as well as Nestor and Rick. But first I want to tell you about the award we're going to present tonight. Digna Ochoa y Placido was a young Mexican human rights attorney in Mexico City. She defended a lot of the people that we used to walk for out on this pier. Environmental activists, military generals that were in prison because of their peaceful work. She came to San Diego about 12 years ago and spoke at an Amnesty International conference. And when she returned home, about a week later, our group got an urgent action saying that she had been tied up in her apartment and the gas turned on and left to die there. She got herself free and wasn't killed, but shortly after that, we got word that she had been shot in the back of the head in her office, her law office. And a note was left behind saying that the same would happen to the other people in the office if they continued their human rights work. So our group decided that the best way to try to keep her voice from being silenced, as many of the people we're walking for tonight are presently silenced, but not not impossible to get them active again if we do our job tonight. We decided to establish a award in her memory and recognize a local human rights hero in Digna's memory who continues the good work. And tonight, as we think about the future of the human rights movement, young people, it's in your hands, as Rick has so profoundly said. It is in your hands. And the woman that we're recognizing tonight, for 25 years as a teacher at Rancho Buena Vista High School, has encouraged, inspired, challenged her students to look beyond the world of texting and twittering and the internet and learn about the world around them, and especially about human rights. She's an amazing lady. She's been to every walk. Her students, year after year after year, come and volunteer and help us do this. We could no longer do it without them. Her students make the thousands of placards that are carried on the pier, year after year after year. And we should all be so lucky to have a teacher like her. She graduated from Oceanside High School, has a degree from San Diego State University and UCSD, master's and baccalaureate. She teaches economics and history. She's the director of the AVID program at Rancho Buena Vista High School. And she is truly one of our local human rights heroes. So it's with a lot of pleasure that we present the Digna Ochoa 2013 Human Rights Defender Award to Erica Glennon. The North County chapter of Amnesty International presents the 2013 Digna Ochoa Human Rights Defender Award to Erica Glennon for 25 committed years of challenging your students to learn about human rights and to become future citizens of the world.
I'd like to say that this is the most incredible award I will ever receive, and I'm very overwhelmed and humbled by this, but I'm also quite certain that my name doesn't deserve to be anywhere near Digna Ochoa's. A woman whose convictions and passions were something she followed even in the face of death threats. Kathy told you a little bit about her. One thing that was mentioned is the Mexican government ruled her death as suicide. And the only way I can think that that could possibly be true, how somebody can shoot themselves in the back of the head, is that she was previously detained and she was tortured and she was threatened and she was told to stop what she was doing. And she refused because she had a courage that was much bigger than I'll ever have. And so I'm very proud and very humbled and overwhelmed, but thankful for this honor. I want to thank you so much to all of you and to Digna. I want to thank my family, my friends, my students. My students are like, oh gosh, another lecture from Miss Glennon, how awful. I have some administrators here that came out to see me for this award this evening. I have fellow teachers, especially from my own department at Rancho Buena Vista, the Social Studies Department. They make me look really good. And I want to thank all of my students, my administrators, and my fellow faculty members, because I got really lucky 25 years ago, and I heard a call to be a teacher. I really did. That sounds maybe kind of funny to a lot of you, but it was something I tried to fight, and I thought, I can find a career that makes more money. Pretty much any career, by the way. And you know, and I'll be fine doing that. But I kept coming back to this desire to teach, and in 25 years, I've never stopped loving what I do. And for my fellow teachers out there, I think that public education is the foundation for our democracy. I think we have an incredible gift that we're able to share with students, and they share back with us. We wonder at the end of the year when we're tired how we'll make it through another year. But when we look at the students and we see what they do and the passions that they develop, it makes it all worth it. So again, thank you. For my friends, I have friends here that I went to high school with. I graduated right here at Oceanside High graduates right here at the band shell 30 years ago. And I wasn't a lot different than a lot of you students sitting here. I had no idea about the problems that the world faced, and certainly I didn't imagine the impact that a single individual or a group of committed individuals could have. I was pretty naive. And I went to UC San Diego, and I had no idea what I was going to major in, something that I thought that would make a lot of money. And I stumbled into majoring into political science with an emphasis on Latin America. And when I started to learn about the human rights abuses in Latin America, I was shocked. I was shocked on every level, especially to find that these systematic methods of torture and making another human being completely inhuman were something that we had known about and were not doing enough to stop. And so what I found is, along with my passion for wanting to teach, I was developing a huge passion for human rights. And how blessed am I that I got to combine those two passions. In 1990, I was doing a mud run with some fellow friends, and it was 6 months after the Jesuit priests at the University of Central America had been murdered, along with their church worker and her 15-year-old daughter. And one of the gentlemen in my group was talking about how he was Catholic and he was not eating meat because it was Lent. And so I brought up, well, what do you think about the murder of these Jesuit priests? And he said, well, we don't know who did that. I said, yeah, we do. It's pretty clear. It was the government, and the military has even admitted responsibility. And he said to me, well, you read your newspapers and I'm gonna read mine. And since you've never been there, you can't say what's really true. I accepted that challenge. And I found a group in Los Angeles called El Rescate that was taking a fact-finding delegation down to Central America, to El Salvador. And in August of 1990, I got in on that group. I want to thank my dad, by the way, who's in the audience, who didn't tell me not to go, although I think he wanted to tell me not to go. But he encouraged me, or at least didn't discourage me, and kept me mindful of my safety while I was there. And when I landed in El Salvador, I saw people that are your age, students, with M16s on every single corner. And as I went out into the countryside, I saw what they referred to then as los muchachos, who had AK-47s. I saw poverty on a level I've never seen before. And I saw children dying of things that we could easily cure here in the United States. When I came back, one of my friends said, I hope that's out of your system. Wow, I don't think so. It got into my system, and it became something that I knew I would continue to work for. The recognition, the demanding of the recognition of human rights. My family, I want to also say thank you for my husband, for my dad, for my daughters. I have 2 daughters of my 4 here, and I actually have 2 grandkids here as well. And I have my son-in-law here, and I want to thank them, because when you have a family that loves you, you want to make the world a better place for them. It becomes even that more important. I want the need for Amnesty International not to exist when my grandchildren are in high school. That would be my best dream. One of my heroes for human rights is Eleanor Roosevelt, and she was the chairwoman of the International Declaration of Human Rights writing, of the commission that wrote that incredible document, which was passed in 1948, and which is the document by which Amnesty International was really founded, saying this is an international declaration. Every human being has basic human rights that cannot be denied to them, no matter their gender or their socioeconomic status or their religious convictions or their sexual orientation. They're inherent rights. Students, one of those rights is the right to education. A lot of you are here tonight as a class requirement, and I understand that, but there's a bigger takeaway here. And that takeaway is that you are exercising your human right to attend school. I think a lot of us have heard in the last couple years about Malala, the young girl who's showing that women around the world, girls, are not being allowed to go to school. But it goes even bigger than that, because there's kids who are denied the right to an education because of war, or because of poverty, or because of the lack of access. And so even though there are times when you're really ready for break, you have this education that's fantastic. And the takeaway tonight is, what are you going to do with it? You just got made aware of some amazing injustices that are happening in the world, and you're going to walk on behalf of some people who don't have the rights that you do. And now, I hope my challenge to all of you is to take that, make it a passion of yours, even if it's a single letter that you write. And if it's listening to the news with a new sense of awareness and saying, that's not okay. Syria is not allowed to use chemical weapons on its population. Little girls aren't allowed to be forced to marry when they're 4, 5, 6 years old. Humans should not be trafficked. And by the way, that's a huge problem even here in North County. Female genital mutilation, not okay. No circumstance where torture is allowed, anywhere, anytime. When we all raise up our voices for that, our voices become very powerful. I want to close by saying 2 things. One is the Olympic torch is going around right now. Ironically, it's going to end up in Russia, a country that is not at all respecting the human rights of its people in many different capacities. President Putin is a very dangerous and secretive man, and there are many things happening there that the world needs to shine the light on. Maybe the Winter Olympics will do that. But my hope is that we could have a torch that would represent human rights, and that torch would go from continent to continent to continent, and even to space, and that the light we shine would be shining the light on human rights abuses and making them stop, making them say it is not okay to treat another human being this way. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." I love that quote, but I'm gonna morph it a little, and I hope she won't mind. No one can be treated inferior unless we consent, and silence is permission. We cannot quietly pretend these things don't happen. We cannot sit passively on the sidelines and just be thankful that we're not there. We have a freedom, we have a right, and we have a responsibility. I want to again thank you, Kathy. You have been my hero since the day I met you. I cannot tell you how much your vision and leadership means to me. All the North County Amnesty International people who work tirelessly without pay, without recognition, just because it's the right thing to do. And I want to thank all of you. I will never receive an award that means more to me than this, and I'm honored and blessed to be here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Mary Gaines. I'm a member of Amnesty Group 471. I want to just say for you young people, I'm a lawyer and I had choices. But you know, one of my choices was that I wanted to help people and I wanted to be a light for people. I just retired after 33 years as a public defender, and I promise you there's nothing more gratifying than helping other people with all the challenges they bring. But listening here today to the people that have been released because of our group writing letters, just writing letters, staying consistent, is really gratifying. And as Rick indicated, it can seem overwhelming, but each of us doing our part makes a unified whole and makes a difference in our world. This is Digna Ochoa, the woman on whose behalf Erica just received the award, who was murdered in Mexico. Next to her is Pradeep. He's a gentleman from Sri Lanka who's been disappeared that we are now writing on behalf of. So today, we've heard a lot of speeches, but now's the time for action, because all the speeches are nice, but action is what counts. So you all should have a placard. There are a few extras here. On these placards are names of people and their country and a little bit about them, and on the back is some information about them. What we're asking you to do today is to be a light for these people. And as you're walking, to think about the freedoms you enjoy, and when you go home, to write a letter based on what's on the back. Send a letter and be a voice.
Je veux Mejri, Tunisia.
Nguyen Van Lee, Vietnam.
Marie Alekina, Russia.
Nadia Tolokonikova, Free Pussy Riot!
Philippe Karma, Indonesia.
Mikhail Alexandrovich, Russia.
Kim Son-hai, North Korea. Juliana Pierre, Dominican Republic.
Hussein Maleki, Iran. Mahdi Isa, Bahrain.
Diomi Nangala of the Congo.
Dozens of women in Mexico who were tortured and sexually assaulted by police officers.
Abdelghani Aloui, Algeria.
Ko A-Young in Myanmar.
Johan Teterisa, Indonesia.
Chun Ing, Myanmar.
Ahmed Quatamish, Israel.
Azam Farmanov, Uzbekistan.
Liu Shava, China.
Waleed Ahmad, Iraq.
Mahmoud Al-Jaddah, Qatar.
Emilio Blanas Robert, Cuba.
Yorn Bofa, Cambodia.
Carlos Cedron, Philippines.
Faik Ali Assad, Syria.
Saiditi Mukabibi, Rwanda.
Anna Politkovskaya, Russia.
Soni Sori, India.
Shiva Nazar Ahari, Iran.
Dr. Abdul Jalil Al-Sinkasi, Bahrain.
Rafael Matos Montes de Oca, Cuba. Brigitte Eknaligoda, Sri Lanka.
Barrios family, Venezuela.
Jessica Garcia, Honduras.